The average American has $0 saved for retirement. But here's the actual number you should have saved by age 30, 40, 50, 60 in order to be able to retire comfortably. Most people are way off. So, we're going to start off by going through retirement is a source of insecurity for many people. Most people, even if they're far ahead, most people think they're behind when it comes to retirement. So we need to have a general baseline for how to know if we actually are on track and what are good milestones and goals to have. So the first thing is a concept of a 4% rule. Now, what is that, Tyler? What the hell are you talking about? Generally speaking, in retirement, assuming we don't have a pension, we're going to be pulling money from our retirement accounts, our IRAs, our 401ks, things of that sort. And so we need to know, all right, what is a healthy amount we can pull each year without draining the account down to zero? Because if I have $1 million in an account and I take that out year one and spend all that, then guess what? Now I have $0 left and I don't have a retirement. So we need to have a general benchmark. We need to have a general benchmark for, okay, this is a good percentage I can live by myself, or I can survive, but I can also make sure that my account is not going to deplete itself and is going to continue sustaining itself. So that percentage is 4%. Generally speaking, you pull 4%. Let's say you have $1 million. That's $40,000 a year. And then we can reverse engineer to determine how much we actually need to retire. Because whatever figure you need per year, whatever your expenses are per year, you can multiply that by 25. All right, that's how much money we need to have for retirement. So if you want to spend $100,000 a year in retirement, we can multiply that by 25. All right, maybe you need 2.5 mil. That's the general concept there. And then so as for the guidelines for every age, how much do you need? Obviously, the further you are along, the more you should have saved up. So if you are 30 years old, we say you should have 1 times your annual salary saved. So if you're 30 and you're making $100,000 a year, we say you should have $100,000 saved already. When you get to age 40, we say the benchmark is 3 times annual salary. So you're 40 years old, you're making $100,000 a year, we say you should have $300,000 saved up. When you get to age 50, that goes up to 6 times. So if you're a 50-year-old, you're making $100,000 a year, you should have $600,000 saved up. And then when we get to age 60, that multiple shoots up to 10 times. So now on the flip side, let's say you're making $300,000 a year. Well, by age 60, you should have $3 million saved up. And then now this assumes you're also spending in conjunction with that. So if you're making $300,000 a year, but you're spending $40K a year, and that's all you want to spend in retirement, then obviously you're not going to necessarily need that much. But these are good benchmarks to shoot for, and they're really things to strive for. And then if you happen to spend less, then that's great. But what we don't want to happen, what I see on a regular daily basis, people who make $100K a year, they're 60, and they have $200,000 saved up. And now it's, okay, yeah, you'll have your Social Security, but we don't nearly have enough. The true fact is most people, when they get to age 60, they don't really want to work anymore. And so telling someone, oh, work 2 extra years, 3 extra years, that's much more difficult. That's a pretty difficult conversation. And a lot of times people just aren't really wanting or able to do that. And so the correct thing is getting ahead of that. Okay, you're 40, you're 50, maybe you're 55. Okay, you're 55, you're wanting to retire in 5 to 7 years. Now's the time to play catch up because you're going to probably be working those years anyway, no matter what. So now let's save more. Let's withhold more from your employer plan. Let's make sure you're taking advantage of whatever your employer matches, because anything your employer is matching, that is free money. We do not want to be leaving free money on the table. We also want to have an understanding of what our Social Security is going to be. You can go on SSA.gov, get a Social Security estimate, and that's really a key factor in building out our financial plan and our retirement plan. Because you may be going into it thinking, oh, I'm going to get $3,000 a month, and then it comes out, no, you're actually at $2,000 a month. And that's a pretty big difference. And so one of the things to understand with Social Security is, when do I claim? How much am I going to get? We already talked about how much. You're going to have to go on your SSA.gov, create an account, get an estimate, and that'll give you a roadmap for Social Security when to claim. There's really no straight answer for that, because are you 62 and you've saved up enough and you just want to enjoy retirement? Then yeah, it may make sense for you to claim. Are you 64 but you want to keep working until you're 67? Then no, you shouldn't claim, because there's a Social Security penalty for people who are working full-time and receiving Social Security. So if you're going to work till 67, no, don't claim before that. Because guess what? When you get to 67, that penalty goes away. So these are all things to take into consideration when looking at Social Security. But they're also things to take into consideration when we're looking at, how much money do I need to retire? And so that's an aspect. But as for how much you need, we already discussed that. Starting with age 30, just rule of thumb, 1 times your salary, and then for every 10 years on, we're going to 3 times that. So at age 40, it's 3 times your salary. So basically, you get to age 30, it's 1 times your salary. Age 40, it's 3 times. 50 is 6 times. 60 is 10 times. You follow that path, and you can reverse engineer that to get how much you need. And it's really important to do this, because I've had situations where people come in, they're making $300,000 a year now. They're spending $15K a month, but they have $100,000 saved up. And the goal is, when we retire, we don't want to have a huge step down in quality of life. If possible, we want to be able to spend the same amount we're spending now. You don't want to be like that person, because that person is going to take a massive step down in quality of life. To go from spending $15,000 a month, because now they're working, they're making $300,000 a year, to now they're retired, they've only got $100,000 to their name, decent Social Security, they're probably going to be able to spend only $5,000 a month. Wow. And then because of the way they didn't save up, they're probably never going to experience that quality of life ever again that they had while they were working. We don't want that. We don't want that at all. We want to put ourselves in a situation that we can have the same quality of life when we're retired as to when we were working. But that requires diligence. That requires planning. Let us know in the comments and description, what's your retirement number? When do you want to retire? How much do you think you should need? I'd really like to see here what everybody's number is. I'm sure there will be a variety. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the comments. Have a good day.